The smell of grilled ribs and citronella candles used to mean something good to me. Every summer, our family barbecue was the one day I looked forward to most. Mom would spend 2 days cooking. Dad would string lights across the backyard. And we would all pretend, just for one afternoon, that everything was fine. I was 31 years old, standing near the cooler with a paper plate in my hand, when my brother Marcus walked across the yard and said the words that changed everything. He was holding a beer, grinning at Uncle Phil like he had just told the best joke of his life. Then he turned to me, loud enough for everyone to hear. So I finally did what Dad always said I should. I sold the workshop. The yard went quiet. Someone turned down the music. I felt my plate go soft in my hands. The workshop. Dad's workshop. The one he had left to both of us in his will. The one I had spent 3 years of my savings maintaining while Marcus never once showed up to help. The one I had asked Marcus about 6 weeks earlier, and he told me everything was fine. I looked at him. He was still smiling. My father, Raymond Cole, built that workshop with his own hands in 1987. He was a carpenter by trade, the kind of man who believed that if you made something carefully enough it would outlast you. He was right. The workshop sat on half an acre behind our childhood home in Clarkston, Ohio. After Dad passed 3 years ago, the property transferred to Marcus and me equally, 50-50, written clearly in the will. Marcus was 36. I was 28. He had a sales job in Columbus and a girlfriend he was always about to propose to. I was the one who came home. I was the one who hired a roofer when the back wall started leaking. I was the one who paid the property taxes twice when Marcus said he was short. I kept every receipt, not because I expected trouble, but because Dad always said paperwork was proof of character. Marcus rarely visited. When he did, he talked about what the land might be worth. I should have heard the warning in that. But he was my brother. I trusted him the way you trust someone who grew up in the same house, who knows how your father laughed, who stood beside you at the same funeral. The silence in the yard lasted about 10 seconds. Then Uncle Phil let out a low whistle and the party noise came back. But I was still standing there. My cousin Tara touched my arm. I did not feel it. Marcus walked over with that easy smile he had worn since we were kids, the one that always got him out of trouble with Mom. He said he had been going to tell me. He wanted to wait until after the food. I asked when the sale happened. He said 3 weeks ago. I asked why he had not called me. He said he figured I would make it complicated. Make it complicated. I thought about the leaking roof I had fixed. The taxes I had covered twice. The weekend I drove 4 hours in February to board up a broken window so the pipes would not freeze. I had made it complicated. I set my plate down on the cooler very carefully. I did not cry. I did not raise my voice. I smiled the way I had smiled at every hard thing in my life, jaw tight, heart running fast, brain already 3 steps ahead. My father taught me that when someone blindsides you, the most powerful thing you can do is stay calm long enough to think. What Marcus did not know, what almost nobody at that barbecue knew, was that I had a folder. I called it the maintenance record, but it was more than that. It was every receipt, every invoice, every email and text message related to that workshop going back 37 months. A new roof section cost $4,200. Property taxes paid twice came to $680 each time. Emergency window repair, $310. Pest inspection and treatment, $900. My out-of-pocket total was just over $10,000, documented to the penny. I had started keeping records because Dad taught me to. He said money between family members always went bad when nothing was written down. He also made Marcus and me both sign a maintenance agreement the year before he died. A notarized document stating that either party making improvements to the shared property had the right to be reimbursed from future sale proceeds before the remaining amount was divided. Marcus had signed it. I still had the original copy. I had been quietly funding a property my brother had just sold without me, and I had the paper trail to prove every dollar. The folder lived in a fireproof box under my bed 40 minutes away, and my phone was in my pocket. I excused myself and walked through the side gate like I was going to my car for a jacket. Mom saw me and called my name. I told her I just needed a minute. I sat in the driver's seat with the door closed and windows up even though it was 83 degrees outside. I called my best friend Dominique. She picked up on the second ring. When I told her what Marcus had said, there was a long pause. Then she said, "Do not go back in there yet. Talk to me first." Dominique had known our family for 12 years. She had also passed her real estate law exam 3 years ago and was working at a firm in Cincinnati. I had not called her for that reason. I called her because she was the only person I trusted to stay rational when I could not. But the legal knowledge was something I was grateful for in that moment. She asked 2 questions. Did I have the maintenance agreement, and was the sale closed or still pending? I told her I had the agreement and did not know the status. She told me to find out before I said one more word to Marcus. Find out quietly. Then she told me who to call. I went back into the yard. I got a fresh plate of food and sat next to my Aunt Bernice and talked about her garden for 20 minutes. I laughed at the right moments. I refilled people's drinks. I watched Marcus hold court near the fire pit, telling the story of the sale like it was a business victory. He used words like fair market value and strategic timing, and the older uncles were nodding along. Our mother Sandra watched him with that proud expression she saved for Marcus, wide eyes, small smile, slight tilt of her head. She had always been prouder of Marcus Faster. It was not cruelty, just habit. But it meant nobody in that yard was going to stop him or question him. To them, this was a success story. A smart son had made a business decision. Nobody would ask where the other owner was. Nobody would ask about a maintenance agreement or 3 years of documented expenses or the fact that I had never once been consulted. That was the part that hurt most. Not only what Marcus had done, but how easy it was for everyone else around me to simply not notice. I texted Dominique from behind my paper plate. He said 3 weeks ago, meaning it could still be in closing. She replied in under a minute. Call the county recorder's office Monday morning. If the deed has not transferred, the sale is not done. Also pull the listing tonight and see who the buyer is. I searched the address on 2 real estate apps while pretending to scroll through photos. It came up on the second one. Listed 41 days ago. Status pending. Sale price $220,000. My stomach dropped. $220,000. For a property I had kept alive for 3 years. A workshop my father built by hand. Marcus had listed it, negotiated it, and signed a purchase agreement without ever calling me. There was a name on the listing. The agent was a woman named Patricia Okafor. I screenshot everything and sent it to Dominique. She replied quickly. Pending means it has not closed. The deed is still in both your names. He cannot legally complete this sale without your signature. He either does not know that or he is hoping you will not figure it out in time. I read that message 3 times. He needed my signature. He just did not know I knew that. Sunday passed slowly. I stayed off social media and did not call Marcus. He texted me twice, once to say he hoped I was not upset and once to say he planned to split the money evenly. I read both messages and put my phone face down. Dominique called Sunday evening and walked me through what she had found. The deed to the property, pulled from public records, listed both my name and Marcus's name clearly. A sale of jointly owned property in Ohio required consent and signature from all owners of record. The purchase agreement Marcus had signed was not legally binding without my co-signature. The title company handling the closing would catch this during their standard title search, which they were legally required to conduct. She told me Marcus may not have told the agent I existed, or he may have claimed power of attorney over the property, which he did not have. She asked what I wanted to do. I thought about my father's hands building that workshop. I thought about the winters I spent driving back to keep it standing. I told Dominique I did not want to burn it all down. I wanted what was fair. She said, then we do this the right way. Monday morning I will make some calls. Monday arrived and I was up before 6. I had printed every receipt from my folder and organized them by date and category. I had written a clear timeline from the day of Dad's funeral to the day Marcus made his announcement at the barbecue. I had a copy of the notarized maintenance agreement. I had screenshots of every text where Marcus and I discussed the property, including 3 where I asked directly if there were any plans to sell, and he told me no. I had not built this folder as a weapon. I had built it because my father told me to write things down. But sitting at my kitchen table with the morning light coming through the window and every document laid out in order, I understood something my father had probably known his whole life. Preparation is not paranoia. It is the only real protection you have when someone you love decides to stop being careful with you. Dominique called at 8:15. She had spoken to a real estate attorney named Theodore Marsh, and he was available at noon. Then she said there was something I needed to hear before the meeting. Something that changed things. There was a second buyer. And Marcus may have already accepted a deposit. Theodore Marsh had an office above a dry cleaner on 5th Street that smelled like pressed wool and coffee. He was a quiet man in his 50s with reading glasses. He kept pushing up his nose and a legal pad he never stopped writing on. I laid everything on his desk. He read without speaking for 11 minutes. Then he asked 3 questions. Were both names on the deed? Had I ever given Marcus written or verbal authorization to sell on my behalf? Did I have documentation of the money I had invested? I slid the folder across the desk. He opened it, looked at the first page, looked at the maintenance agreement, and wrote something on his pad. He said the purchase agreement Marcus had signed was unenforceable without my co-signature. The title company would flag this during closing, which they were legally required to conduct. If Marcus had accepted a deposit from a buyer, he had created a significant legal problem for himself, not for me. He paused. The maintenance agreement and my documented expenses gave me a claim to reimbursement from sale proceeds before any split occurred. Approximately $10,000, he confirmed. He looked at me over his glasses. Your brother may not have known about any of this. Either way, you hold a strong position. Theodore sent a formal letter to Patricia Okafor, the listing agent, that same afternoon. It identified me as the co-owner of record, notified her that the purchase agreement was not legally valid without my signature, and requested that all closing proceedings be paused pending resolution of the co-ownership matter. He sent a copy to the title company and a courtesy copy to Marcus. Marcus called me 47 minutes later. His voice was different from the barbecue voice. Tighter. More careful. He said the letter was unnecessary and we could handle this as a family. I told him I was happy to talk but needed to do it with my attorney present. He said I was being dramatic. I said I did not think so. He said he had already told the buyer the deal was done. I said that was a problem he needed to solve, because the deal was not done and could not be done without me. There was a long pause. Then he said he thought we could work something out. I told him I thought so too, and that he should reach out through Theodore. Then I ended the call. My hands were completely steady. I had expected to feel shaky. Instead, I felt clear, the way air feels after rain when the storm has gone. Mom called Tuesday morning. I had been waiting for this. She had heard from Marcus. Her voice was gentle in the way it got when she was worried about her children fighting, soft and careful and slightly pained. She said Marcus had explained that there was a miscommunication. She hoped I was not going to make things difficult over a property that had been sitting empty anyway. Empty. I had to take a breath before I answered. I explained calmly that the property was not empty. I had been maintaining it for 3 years. I had spent over $10,000 doing it. Marcus had sold it without telling me, and as a co-owner of record, I had legal rights he had not honored. Mom went quiet. Then she said, "But he was going to split the money with you." I asked her if she thought that was the same as being consulted. She did not have an answer. I told her I loved her, and that I was handling this the right way, through proper channels, not through a fight. I was not trying to hurt Marcus. I was making sure I was not invisible in something that directly involved me. She said she understood. But she did not call again that week to ask me to stand down. Theodore received a response from Marcus's hastily hired attorney 2 days later. The letter was aggressive in tone. It suggested my maintenance expenses were voluntary and did not constitute a legal claim. It argued the maintenance agreement was informal and possibly unenforceable. It pointed out that Marcus had been listed as primary contact on the property insurance and had therefore been managing the asset. I read it twice and felt a cold calm settle into my chest. They were going to fight this. Theodore was not rattled. He said aggressive opening letters were standard tactics. He confirmed the maintenance agreement had been notarized, witnessed, and signed freely by both parties, making it absolutely enforceable. He told me my documentation was thorough enough to withstand scrutiny. He also reminded me of the most important thing, which was that the sale still had not closed. The title company had placed a hold the moment they received our letter. The buyer was waiting. The deposit sat in escrow. Marcus had a problem he had created entirely himself, and every day it went unresolved was a day it cost him more. I was not trying to punish my brother, but I was done absorbing the cost of his decisions in silence. Whatever happened next, I was going to be visible, counted, and heard. The mediation meeting was set for the following Thursday. Neutral location: a conference room at Theodore's building with a round table and bad overhead lighting. Marcus arrived with his attorney, a man named Derek Sims who wore a suit too expensive for the room. Dominique came with me as a witness and a steady presence. Theodore sat to my right. Marcus and I had not spoken since the call after the letter was sent. When he walked in, he looked at me for a moment and then looked away. He had dark circles under his eyes. He had not been sleeping well. I understood that. I had not been sleeping well either. But I was there with my folder and my timeline and 3 years of quiet, unglamorous work backed by every receipt to prove it. Derek Sims opened by suggesting my claims were exaggerated and that the maintenance agreement had never been intended to create a financial obligation of the kind I was describing. Theodore responded by placing a copy of the notarized agreement on the table and reading the relevant clause aloud in full. The room went quiet when he finished. Marcus was staring at the table. He recognized his father's language in that document. He recognized his own signature at the bottom. Derek Sims tried a different approach. He said my expenses were estimates and that I lacked professional invoices for most of the work. Theodore opened my folder and placed 12 professionally issued invoices on the table one by one, each with a contractor's name, a license number, a date, and my signature. Derek said the property tax payments might have come from a shared account. Theodore placed 2 bank statements showing the payments leaving my personal checking account. Derek said the maintenance agreement might not hold up to a legal challenge. Theodore placed the notarized certification page. After the 4th document, Derek stopped talking. The room was very quiet. Then Marcus looked up and looked directly at me for the first time since he walked in. His expression was not angry. It was something closer to tired and ashamed. He said quietly, without looking at his attorney, "How much does she get reimbursed?" Derek started to speak. Marcus held up a hand. He kept looking at me. "How much?" Theodore said documented maintenance expenses of $10,460 plus applicable interest to be deducted from gross sale proceeds before the remaining amount was divided equally. Marcus nodded slowly. "Okay, just that. Okay." 3 years of invisible work, spoken aloud and acknowledged in one syllable. The agreement took 2 more days to finalize in writing. The sale would proceed. The buyer's deposit remained in escrow. Marcus would sign a corrected purchase agreement listing both of us, and I would co-sign the closing documents. From the sale price of $220,000, $10,460 would be returned to me first as reimbursement. The remaining balance would be split 50-50 after agent fees and closing costs. My share came to approximately $93,000. More money than I had ever seen at one time in my life. I signed the closing documents on a Tuesday afternoon in Theodore's office. Marcus signed separately. We were not in the room at the same time. I do not know if that was planned or just how it happened. Either way, I sat at that table with Theodore beside me and Dominique on the phone, and I signed my name on every page slowly and clearly. Not because I was savoring it, but because my father always said that when you put your name on something, you should mean it. I meant every line. When Theodore slid the final page across, I signed it, set the pen down, and sat very still for a moment. Outside the window, it was raining. The wire hit my account 4 business days later. I sat at my kitchen table and stared at the notification on my phone for a long time. I had expected to feel triumphant. I did not. I felt something quieter, something that took me a while to name. It was relief, but underneath the relief was grief. Because the workshop was gone. Because my father's careful handwritten maintenance agreement had served its purpose, which meant the thing it was protecting was over. Because I had fought for something I cared about and won, and winning still left a space where the thing used to be. I called my mother that evening, not to report the outcome but just to talk. She asked how I was doing. I said I was okay. She said Marcus had called her and was feeling bad about how things had gone. I did not ask what he said. I told her that was between him and his conscience. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Your father would have been proud of you." My throat got tight and I needed a moment. I said I hope so. She said not hoped. Would have been. She was sure of it. 3 weeks after the closing, I got a call I did not expect. It was from the buyer, a man named Arthur Webb, who introduced himself as a retired Finnish carpenter. He had purchased the workshop property not to develop it but to restore it. He had found a feature in a local woodworking magazine from 2001 that profiled my father's work, and he had bought the property specifically because of that article. He also told me something that stopped me cold. He had found something during his walkthrough that the listing had not mentioned. There was a storage room off the back of the main workshop, access through a narrow door behind a pegboard wall. He had assumed it was empty. But when he cleared the space, he found a set of hand-built cabinets, locked, with a note taped to the front in my father's handwriting. The note said one word: Catherine. My middle name. My father had never once called me by my first name. He always called me Catherine. Marcus always called me Kate. There was something locked inside those cabinets that my father had intended specifically for me, and Marcus had sold the property without ever looking behind that pegboard wall. I sat down on my kitchen floor and pressed my hand to my mouth. Arthur Webb was a decent man. He said the cabinets were mine without hesitating. He did not ask for anything in return. He said he would ship the contents at his own expense the moment I confirmed my address. I asked if I could come in person instead. He said of course. I drove to Clarkston the following Saturday. Arthur met me at the gate. The workshop looked the same from the outside, the same weathered wood and the roofline I had paid to repair. He walked me through without talking much, which I appreciated. The storage room was exactly as he described. The narrow door, the pegboard wall moved aside, and there were the cabinets. 3 of them, hand-built, fitted seamlessly together. My father's work was unmistakable in the joinery, in the way the wood grain had been matched and oriented for strength. My hands were shaking when I opened the first cabinet. Inside were woodworking tools engraved with my initials, the same tools Dad had taught me to use when I was 8, the ones I had assumed were given away after he passed. Inside the second was a leather-bound journal with 31 years of entries, the last dated 4 days before his death. Inside the third was a sealed envelope with my full name in his handwriting. I read the letter in Arthur Webb's truck with the heater running because my hands were too cold to hold the paper without shaking. My father had written it 2 months before he died, when he was still well enough to sit at his workbench. He wrote that he had known for a long time which of his children understood the difference between what something was worth and what it could be sold for. He wrote that he structured the will this way not because he doubted Marcus, but because he wanted to make sure I was protected. He had notarized the maintenance agreement himself and kept a copy with his attorney because he thought it might be needed one day. The tools were mine because I had always asked how they worked. The journal was mine because he wanted me to know him past what a father usually shows a child. He wrote that he loved both his children, but had seen in me a patience he recognized from deep in himself, and that patience he believed was a form of power most people never understood. He ended with one line: "The workshop was never about the building. It was about teaching you that what you make belongs to you. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise." Philip Carver, my father's attorney, called me the following Monday. He said Dad had left a sealed addendum to the estate, to be delivered to me only if the workshop property became involved in a legal dispute between the 2 heirs. The addendum had been held in escrow at Carver's office for 3 years. My father had anticipated this. He had not arranged it as punishment for Marcus. He had arranged it as a safety net for me. The addendum contained 2 things. First, a written statement affirming that the maintenance agreement had been created with full legal intent and that documented expenses incurred by either heir were to be honored as valid reimbursement claims. It was notarized 2 weeks before his death. Second, a codicil to the will I had never seen. It said that in the event of a forced or contested sale, 20% of proceeds above the maintenance reimbursement were to be placed in a trust in my name, expressly for acquiring or developing a workspace of my own choosing. Not a gift. A foundation. A starting point that nobody could take from me. I sat in my car outside Carver's office and cried for the first time since the barbecue. Not from sadness. from being known so completely by someone no longer here. The trust amount came to $44,000. Combined with my share of the sale, I had nearly $140,000. More than I had started with. More than I had imagined when I was printing receipts and making phone calls and trying to stay calm at a barbecue while my world shifted under my feet. I sat with a financial advisor named Curtis Bell for 3 hours one Tuesday. He had been recommended by Dominique, patient and clear and without judgment. I told him about the trust stipulation, that the 20% had to go toward a workspace. He said it was one of the most thoughtful estate conditions he had ever seen. We mapped out 3 options. Purchasing a small property outright, leasing a commercial space to build a business, or a hybrid approach of buying a modest property with a structure I could renovate myself. I kept coming back to the third option, not because it was the most conservative, though it was, but because it felt like the right continuation of something my father had started. He had built a workshop and left me tools and the means to use them. The most honest answer to what he gave me was not to invest it safely. It was to build something. I found the property in October. A modest half-acre outside of Morrow, Ohio, with a small house and a detached garage. The listing called a workshop space, though in its current state it was closer to a storage unit with ambitions. The price was $91,000. I offered $88,000. They countered at $90,000. I accepted. Closing took 6 weeks. The day I got the keys, I drove out there alone. I stood in the doorway of the garage and looked at the bare concrete floor and the empty shelves and the afternoon light coming through a window someone had left cracked open. I put my hand flat on the doorframe. The wood was old but solid. My father would have recognized the joint at the corner. He would have said good bones. I said it out loud to nobody, and it felt exactly right. I spent the next 2 months doing renovation work myself where I could and hiring local contractors where I could not. I used the tools from the cabinet every single day. Each day I was in that space, I thought about my father, not with grief exactly, but with a kind of ongoing conversation. Like the work was a way of talking to him. His voice in the journal sounded just like his actual voice. Marcus called in November. I almost did not pick up. I was covered in sawdust in my workshop, and the call felt like a disruption from a different life. But I answered. His voice was quieter than I had heard it in years. He said he had been thinking. That he did not know about the cabinets or the letter or the addendum. That if he had known, he was not certain it would have changed what he did, and that honesty was the only thing he could offer me now. He said he had told himself a story where selling the property was practical and correct, and that story made it easy to avoid questions he should have asked. He said he was sorry. Not the sorry that means please stop being angry. The other kind. The kind that costs something. I did not rush to accept it. I told him what hurt most was not the money or the sale, but the fact that he had looked at 3 years of my work and decided it needed no conversation. He said he knew. I said that was the part one needed him to keep knowing, not just today but going forward. He said he would try. I believed him halfway. That was more than I had in years. By December my workshop was done. Not finished the way a magazine photographs it. Finished the way a working space gets finished, with good light and clean shelving and everything in its place. My father tools hung on the pegboard wall, each on the hook that matched its shape. The journal lived on a shelf beside a photo of Dad and me taken the summer I was 12, both squinting in the sun outside the original workshop in Clarkston. I made my first piece in January. A small side table in white oak, simple lines, careful joints. I gave it to Dominique as a thank you. She cried, which I had not expected, and that made me cry too. The year that started with a paper plate going soft in my hands at a family barbecue ended with me standing in a space that was fully and completely mine. I had not engineered this outcome or predicted the cabinets or known about the addendum. I had just done what my father taught me. I kept records. I stayed calm. I trusted the paperwork. And when the moment came, I let the truth speak. My father built a workshop. And he made sure I could build one too. So tell me, if this had been your family, what would you have done?